Sometimes those songs just like they grab me, and it takes me, I don't know, we'll see how long it takes me to get back in my head so I can talk. It just brings me to a different place entirely. Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm going to start with a talk that is going to require at least my brain. I don't know if it's going to require yours, because I'm starting with the Charles Fillmore quote. And I love to read Charles Fillmore, but I pretty much can take 2 paragraphs at a time, because there's so much in every paragraph. Some people sit down and read a whole book of his. 1 or 2 paragraphs is enough for me, because he jam-packs them for them. And Charles Fillmore is one of the co-founders of Unity. Charles and Myrtle, they're the people who started this particular little train of thought that we call Unity Truth. So, honey, will you put up the first slide? And for some reason, I have lost my ability to control this thing. So it's like when I hit it, it goes 3 forward, 5 back, I don't know. Some sort of metaphor. Anyway, so Roland's going to do it. So this is from the 12 Powers of Man book Charles wrote. And by the way, he wasn't the first person to think of the 12 powers. It had been an idea floating around in the New Thought community. And there was a particular lady who actually came up with these 12 powers. And other people come up with other 12 aspects. But you can understand why people might do that. The 12 apostles, 12 powers, or 12 attributes, virtues, whatever, things we want to get to help us evolve. So the one that hit me this week that the voice of Spirit told me to talk about was renunciation. And here's the quote we're going to explore. A change of mind affects a corresponding change in the body. If the thoughts are lifted up, the whole organism is raised to higher rates of vibration. If the system has been burdened with congestion of any kind, a higher life energy will set it into universal freedom. Now, Charles, basically, Charles relates the powers to different functions of our human body, and you can guess what function renunciation is. I know it could be an interesting talk, right? But I want to point out this part. If the system has been burdened with congestion of any kind, as you know, I've been fighting a little congestion. I still have a little bit of it. I pretty much think that this congestion is, like everything, some kind of lesson to me about what I need to let go of. And the interesting point that I got when I was looking about renunciation, which we know that's letting go of things that no longer serve us, is, well, what do you do with that? So you realize you're stuck. So what are you supposed to do? Sometimes you don't even know what is the stuckness, right? If it was obvious, you would have let go of it, clearly. It wouldn't still be there. So the point of this is we are going to explore it, get the spiritual practice, and know that we can keep using the spiritual practice for when you're ready to let go of it. I don't know how long I'm going to have this congestion. Maybe all fall. I don't know. Let's find out. Who knows? Week to week. How long am I going to hang on to something that no longer serves me? Well, you know the answer to that. You hang on to it as long as it's giving, as long as you're not quite willing to let go of it. Right? I highlighted a certain part. If the thoughts are lifted up, the whole organism is raised to higher rates of vibration. That's kind of a good thought. If our thoughts are lifted up, it's going to change our whole organism. But it's been my experience, it isn't immediate, and sometimes there's a little fussiness involved. One of the first metaphysical things I ever learned was this picture. This idea of you are like a pitcher of clear water, right? And whatever is maybe not quite spirit is still in you, but let's just say it's a layer of mud. So you're a pitcher of clear water, and there's a layer of mud at the bottom. And when the water is still, the mud lies there and the water is clear. Well, when you start pouring into this pitcher another pitcher of water, it's going to mix up the mud on the bottom. and it's going to mix it up. You keep pouring in the clear water, and it's going to look muddy for a while. Well, it's going to flow out over, but it's going to take a whole lot of clear water until all the mud is flushed out, right? So sometimes when you start when you add your spiritual truth teaching, you get a little muddy, or you get a little congested. Or I don't know about your ego, but my ego hangs on with all of my fingers and all of my toes because it doesn't want to let go of whatever is its coping mechanism. So think about that. Next slide. Sweetie pie. Okay. There's some beautiful leaves for you to look at. Fall is also a symbol of changing and renunciation. Clearly, the trees got to let go of the leaves, right? If we anthropomorphize them, we think, well, maybe it's a little painful. Okay, next slide. There must be a renunciation or letting go of old thoughts before the new can find place in the consciousness. This is a psychological law which has its outer expression in the intricate eliminative functions of the body, okay, including sneezing with colds and congestion. Next slide. And there's a whole bunch of pretty leaves in a heart. You could have told that if I didn't tell you, right? It's like, next one. All those who go deep enough into the study of the mind agree perfectly on fundamentals, one of which is that the universe originated in mind, was projected into action by thought, and is being sustained by mind power. Okay, that's one of our unity truth teachings, that one of the things we rely on, that we start with a thought. So that is one of the things we keep returning to over and over again, that if you change your thoughts, things can change. Right? Next slide. Self-analysis reveals the manner in which the individual mind acts, and this action is the key to all action in the small and the great, in the microcosm and the macrocosm, in man and in God. Whew, say that fast. Okay. And self-analysis reveals. Self-analysis. Okay? That is the tool. Okay, that's the spiritual practice about how you're going to get to this. Right? That means looking at yourself and analyzing it. This is using your brain. That's one of the practices. Next slide. Another point of agreement is that thoughts are things, that they are ideas projected into form, partaking of the nature of the thinker. Thoughts are things. Ideas projected into form. Well, you can close off those things. So I feel like Charles's quotes, you got to look at them as well as you hear them. But it's in that book. We have the book in the bookstore. We got the book in the library downstairs if you want to get into it. And I'll post it on our Facebook too. I'll put the quote on Facebook if you want to go into it. Renunciation, letting go. Here's the spiritual practice. Letting go is forgiveness plus surrendering to God. That's all. I'll get that one up later, that mind map. You can just put the pretty stained glass window up. All right. This is my own formula. Not like we've never heard it before. Letting go equals forgiveness and surrendering to God. And I want to explore forgiveness. I also want to explore the voice of the ego and the voice of the spirit. I really have something that I have learned, and that is I can actually determine when it's my ego and when it's the voice of spirit. And I'm going to tell you this simple formula. You can tell it's your ego, not because it's going to be telling you how awesome you are, your ego is going to be laying on some guilt. Okay? Whatever it is, whatever the core thought is, if it's the voice of ego, there will be some guilt and some I am a worm and a terrible human being involved. Okay? That is the voice of, what we're calling the part of your mind, the ego. It's not the Freudian thing, it's just the ego versus the Holy Spirit. The voice of the Holy Spirit is always going to tell you that you are light and love and a part of God and you are wonderful and awesome. That's how you're going to tell. Every single time, if you want to know the difference, that is going to be the difference. When you take it down, you might take a little analysis. Is this the voice of the Holy Spirit or is this the voice of my ego? That's going to be the bottom line. Because the thoughts are going to make you feel one way or the other, right? We have no neutral thoughts. We have thoughts we can not pay attention to, but if you really want to let that thought resonate with you, it's going to be one way or the other. It is going to make you feel guilty, or it is going to make you feel like you're loved and awesome. That's how you know, every single time. This just doesn't show up as a slide. It's I have a bunch of these up in the front. They're integral maps showing the spiral of evolution, and I've given a couple talks on it. And this is like a book in itself. It just doesn't show very well up there. But if you want one, I've got them up here. I put them in the bookstore. They're $5 a piece. And if you're interested in that integral soul evolution, and basically the ego is, all down here. And then when we start to get to unconditional love, we raise above that. The reason I wanted to mention that map, and I also want to show the mind map from David Hawkins, and I don't think you can read that much either, but basically the David Hawkins scale has, there's, the low parts, grief, fear, desire, anger, pride, falsehood, all of that underneath truth. And then truth, courage, neutrality, willingness, acceptance, reason, love, joy, peace, and being. Okay, that's the scale. And the reason I want to point out these two scales, the spiral map is the stages of humanity, right? And that mind map is the individual map. And what I wanted to say is, how amazing was it that Jesus, at the time when he was around, at the time where consciousness was way below truth and honesty, where the prevailing government conscious, the Roman government, it was might versus makes right, okay? Might makes right. In fact, 30 to 50 years after Jesus left the planet, the Roman government basically pulverized the city of Jerusalem and killed every man, woman, and child. Man, woman, and child in the city. Okay? That was the consciousness of the time. That was the governmental consciousness of Rome at that time. That's horrendous. And in the fact that this person, Jesus, this teacher, Jesus, could come up with forgiveness as a teaching, that's pretty amazing. That there were people who had human consciousness that was not buying into the consciousness of the time, and instead could preach forgiveness. This is from Matthew. Then Peter came and said to him, Lord, if another member of the church sins against me, how often should I forgive? As many as 7 times? Jesus said to him, not 7 times, but I tell you 77 times. So Jesus' message was forgiveness. Forgiveness and love, that's what I like to boil down the New Testament to, but forgiveness in the face of that consciousness. We're really lucky at this point in time, at least in our country, the consciousness is at least at truth. The prevailing consciousness is at least in truth and the worthiness of a human life. The government is not going to come along and pulverize men, women, and children of any kind, at least in our country. And yet, we still might have to reach into our inner being to apply forgiveness. So here's this this absolutely fabulous teaching that arose out of that time about forgiveness, and yet, and we need to do it too. I have two stories of forgiveness that I really like. One, you notice I put a bunch of kids' books back there. That's because I realized there's this really sweet book one of the people who came to our church before wrote. It's called Where's Charlie? It's a children's book. It's cute. It's about missing Charlie. Charlie is the son who died. So this is a story of forgiveness. You know, a mother's forgiveness to the universe, to God, to a son who died. You know, that's a lot. And if it, you know, there's a couple of those books out there. Let me read just this little part. Charlie died. He no longer has his body, but he is everywhere. I feel him. I see him. I see him in my smile. It makes me smile. I saw a duck on top of my roof. I thought that was weird. Charlie, is that you? I miss him so much, so I asked the universe, please give me a sign. I wanted to know that Charlie could hear me. The universe gave me a sign. 10/12 is Charlie's birthday. I started to see 10/12 everywhere. On my alarm clock, everywhere. On a haircut coupon. When I'm sad, are you okay, Charlie? 10/12 shows up. And that's the mother's forgiveness. There's also a daughter's forgiveness. I've talked about this story before. The story of, wow, right now, I can't believe I can't remember her name. I'm going to call her Jen. The lady in Hawaii who has a website. She photographs homeless people because she wants to bring their plight. She wants to humanize the faces of homeless people in Hawaii. And so she was photographing homeless people, and she realized that one of the people she was photographing was her father. You know, and that his mental illness was such that he wouldn't talk to her, you know. And she basically tried and reached out to him for a couple of years until something happened, was that he actually had an episode of illness and got put in a hospital, and they started giving him medicine. And then the end of that happy story is that he was able to connect to her, and she was able to connect to him again. But that's a story of forgiveness too, because there was some stuff in her life. It wasn't exactly an easy childhood, and she had some hard stuff she had to go through. And it's almost as if she didn't even go to that place of not forgiveness when, you know, her heart was already open and ready to forgive. And so much forgiveness that she brought all of the faces of all the homeless people to us so we could see them and, you know, humanize them, forgive them, and love them, and work toward reintegrating them, however that works. So those are two stories that I just love those stories. I know you have your own stories of forgiveness. And I know you have your own approach to forgiveness. Now, I talked a little bit about that workshop we did yesterday. And here's what I want to say. One of the things I came away with, the reason we wanted to do that workshop on the Enneagram, was that it shows how we're not all alike. You know, we have different approaches to everything, and that it's really helpful. Of course, it's helpful to understand our approach. That's one thing that's very important. The self-analysis that Charles Fillmore wrote about, really, really important. It's also really important to understand the way the people who are not like us approach things, and how they connect to life, and how they connect to something like forgiveness. Now, in this particular workshop, the Enneagram, if you don't know that, is a system of personality I'm not going to call it analysis. It's a system of personality. What you do is you find it's like you find your default personality. You find what your ego copes with, And one of the gems that this lady said, which I loved, was she said, in relationships, it is usually not our virtues that cause problems, right? It's not our virtues that cause the problems. It's the foibles or whatever. It's the things that our ego does to maintain our status quo that other people, are irritating to other people or other people see as faults, and we certainly can see them as faults too. So it's our foibles that cause the problem, which is why we want to look at it sometimes, which is why we want to look at it in order to let go of it. It's one of the things that contributes to forgiveness and surrendering. Now I'm not going to, if you're interested in the Enneagram, it's a really cool thing to explore, but one of the things is that one of the ways of looking at it is that people there are 3 types of looking at something. And in this type, there's the positive outlook group, and there's the competency group, and there's the reactive group. Now, the positive outlook group is going to deny that they have problems, right? So that is kind of their default, that is their egoic response, their automatic response is to deny that they have problems. Well, in a way that it sounds like denying that you have a problem is sort of a unity teaching, right? That is one of our unity teachings. But denying that you have a problem without doing the work is what we're talking about here. Having it be your automatic habit. It's not about consciously denying that this is a problem to me. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about your ego's habit, that ego voice of spirit. And the reason the ego would deny you have a problem is because underneath whatever it is the guilt. You don't deny you have a problem because you're feeling like God. When it's your habit to deny you have a problem, it's because you're feeling like a worm and there's some thought process that triggered those feelings, whatever it is, that you're not worthy, that you're guilty. Okay? Now, the competency group, they cut off feelings and solve problems logically. So the competency group is going to, well, they're the people you definitely, you want everybody on your team, by the way. You want some competency people because they'll just start doing it. They're not even going to look at the problem, they're just going to start doing it. Now, as far as forgiveness, I don't know what that, competent people will go right to the forgiveness part. They might do they'll just like, okay, you're forgiven. It's forgiven, you're forgiven, you can start coming back and having dinner with me, or whatever it is. It's going to solve the problem like that, logically. And they're not going to feel it. That's their habit. Okay? Then the reactive group is going to react strongly and need response from others. And by the way, I'm in the reactive group. And I just want to say that even when I look at that and I read the reactive group, I actually find that I start feeling a little guilty and a little bit of shame comes up because when I analyze myself, it's like it triggers those feelings, that I want to have my feelings and I want to put my feelings out there and you guys had better respond to my feelings before anything else happens. You can ask Roland how that works. Yeah, that's my default. First we have to deal with these feelings, And now here's the really super awesome good news about this. There's one answer that works for all 3 groups. The spiritual practice that I talked about, letting go equals forgiveness and surrendering to God, works for all 3 groups. Now the letting go is probably going to be different in every group. If you're the denial group, you're going to have to let go of your denial. If you're in the competency group, you're going to have to let go of whatever plan you have going formulated to help everything. And if you're in the reactive group, you may have to let go of your feelings. But the surrendering to God, this is the key. This is what I want everybody to put in their pocket and bring home with them. Surrendering to God works no matter what kind of person you are, no matter what you used, you can hand it over to God. However it is you hand it over. You can hand it over to God. You can just surrender to God. Because we don't have to do this alone. You know, we don't have to do it alone. However you contact God, in your mind, your heart, or your gut, however you do that, God is going to be there, and you're going to be able to surrender it. Because I don't know about you, but I don't think people can surrender these horrible things without a little help from grace, without the Spirit. I can't surrender the terrible things that people have done to me and you know, are doing in the world to other people. I can't surrender those without help from Spirit, without surrendering. So that's the good news. So no matter whatever the way you are, whatever you are, that's a beautiful, beautiful news, is that you can surrender to God all those ways. So let's take an offering for unity. I invite you to take your tithe and your love offering in your hand, and or your imaginary offering, because you put it on the credit card. Which, by the way, the bookstore will take your credit card. It works like a charm.